Greetings! I'm going to show you how to make a stitch down pattern if you have a last. So I have a last that is just right for my foot, the 8.5 medium. Its length is about 10.25 inches. And if you don't have a last, you can make them using directions on my website. First of all, I'm going to make a pattern of the sole. And you can see it has all these nail holes in it where the leather was stretched over the top and then nailed to the bottom. I'm going to make a pattern for this by putting a piece of paper over the last and taping it in place. And then I'm just going to scribble. And this is the most accurate way to make a sole pattern. So I'll be back when I've got this accomplished. Now I have my sole pattern. I've drawn around it on this piece of file folder. To make my sole for a stitch down, I want to add 1/4 inch all around the edge of this. I'm using this wing divider to make this line, but it's set at 1/4 inch. So now I'll cut this out. When I decided to sell shoemaking kits, I thought maybe people making a kit would like to not have to do so many stitches. So I decided to make the stitch marks 1/2 inch apart. So I took one piece flat pattern from my book, How to Make Simple Ecological Shoes for Women. Here's an example of a sole from the shoemaking kit, and it has those holes marked 1/2 inch apart all the way around. So in this video, I'll show you how I determined where the stitch marks go on the upper piece to match up with those on the sole. Now I've cut the pattern out for the upper of the one piece flat, and I've added 1/2 inch around the edge, and it already had 1/4 inch added. So I have about 3/4 inch added on to what is actually the upper of the last. So I've cut that out of felt, and I'm going to drape this over the last. First I'll stitch it up at the back of the heel. I put about 3/4 inch of contact cement on the bottom edge of the upper, and I also put it along the edge of the bottom of the last. And I start at the heel, and I have a little mark here what height I'd like to have at the back of the heel, and I've noticed I've made marks about 3/4 inch all along the edge, so I'll know how much of the upper to pull and cement under the last. I did the heel, and now I did the toe. The toe with this pointed bit at the front of the top line, I can line that right up with that center line there, and then pull this down to the 3/4 inch distance. And I'm now going to do the easy part, which is pulling this down on the sides, and then I'll work with the heel and toe area. I have the easy part of adhering the upper to the bottom of the last along the sides. Now in the heel area, it doesn't just automatically fall in place. So I have this awl, and I'm starting in the middle, and then I'm going to make another pleat. So I keep just getting smaller and smaller little pleats in there until it all lays down just right. Now this area needs to be smoothed out a little bit, and I'll do that other side then it's the same thing up in the toe area. Actually, my goal is to have it smooth right along this line. I don't have to have all my pleats looking so good like you would if you were making a fully lasted shoe. So I'll again go to somewhat the center here of this part that needs to be gathered with my awl, and then keep dividing these pleats in two, and with my finger I'm checking that it's called the feather line is smooth, and not worry so much about the pleats since this is going to be a stitch down. So now I have everything pleated and it's all smooth. Well, pretty much smooth right here in this area. I think that'll be fine. And now it all comes together. I used this pattern to make my sole. I have a layer of vegetable tan leather for the top sole, and then a repurposed rubber sole. I'm situating the upper exactly in place, and using these bands made from a motorcycle inner tube has been really helpful. Usually if you were making a lasted shoe, you would nail the sole to the bottom, but that's really hard for me to pull off, to turn this last upside down and hold it while I'm nailing. So these bands have been terrific. So all I have to do now to have my pattern complete is to go along here and make a dot everywhere that I see a stitch hole in the sole. So that's how I will know exactly where to punch the stitch holes in the upper so they'll match up with the sole, and then I can make my stitch down shoe. I have transferred these stitch marks from the felt upper to this one-piece flat pattern. If you have a last and want to make stitch downs and then making the stitch marks from a pattern like this should work just fine. So now I'm going to get a piece of leather and make a sample shoe.